Right, yeah, I just want to start by saying it's really reassuring to see some themes coming out of other people's talk about sociability, and I'm going to lean in hard here. This is the first piece of academic work I've really produced, so like Lauren said, please be kind. I'd like to share with you the study that I've done, what I found, what I think is interesting. So I'm just going to set one thing going and we'll get into it. Okay. Right. Let's proceed. So, during my undergraduate degree, I noticed a persistent and pervasive problem. When a group couldn't agree on a game, play rarely commenced, and when it did, the experience was almost always unappealing for everyone involved. What struck me how universal this phenomenon seemed was that anyone I spoke to immediately recognised the problem, yet most simply shrugged their shoulders and accepted it as an unavoidable part of playing games with others. My observation became the seed for this research. I wanted to understand why starting multiplayer play can be so difficult, and importantly, how we might design better systems to support groups rather than just on an individual basis. This problem crystallised for me as I've become a more user-centred designer, and again throughout my preceding degrees. I care as much about the players we lose as the ones we engage. I think it's very important. If I lose a player, I very much want to know why. My core argument is simple for this research. If we can better understand why people play socially, we can design platforms and systems that better support collective decision making, addressing the group's needs rather than just optimizing for individual matchmaking. The immediate implications could be significant. Improved discovery tools, smarter matchmaking, and more seamless connections and coordination between friends. But there's potential perhaps to go a little bit further, potentially transforming how we design multiplayer systems altogether. If time allows, I'll revisit some of the possibilities at the end of the talk. So, multiplayer gaming has become one of the most dominant forms of digital entertainment, with over 3.2 billion global players and nearly half preferring multiplayer formats. While we know a lot about why individuals play, far less is understood about how groups actually come together to initiate play. The starting point for this research was an observed gap. Contemporary systems efficiently matchmake players on an individual basis, but they rarely capture the rich, negotiated process that leads people to start playing together. This study focuses on how collective decisions to play emerge. It addresses social, situational, and motivational factors that shape initiation and explores what existing systems fail to support. And just for clarity, I've used a couple of words here that I'm going to very prescriptively and deliberately use. When I say initiation, I'm talking about one person has the conceived idea, I want to play a game with other people. And commencement is everyone presses play and starts play. Okay, so I'm talking about the space in between. Okay. There's a good body of work exploring motivation to play games. I haven't got time to explore all the literature out there, but I thought I'd share some of the relevant literature. I found that much of the existing literature focuses on individual motivations to play, often using frameworks like self-determination theory, uses and gratifications, and social presence and gaming questionnaire. Delving in towards SDT in particular, a lot of studies identify autonomy, competence, and relatedness as key drivers. However, when I was looking at the literature, I noted relatedness appears to be underexplored, and this aligns with some work by Tyke and Meckler. When they were evaluating the Penn scale, they found that whilst competence and autonomy are measured in around 38% of studies, relatedness appears in only about 24%. More socially grounded work by Kay and Bryce highlights that cohesive group structures where shared goals and complementary participation are present are highly important. Many scenarios neglect the inherently social nature of multiplayer play, especially in genres requiring high and persistent collaboration like co-op puzzle games, narrative role-play, sandbox games. I'm sure there's many more. Research also tends to study traits on a static basis rather than moment-to-moment fluid negotiations, meaning we lack understanding of how social readiness and situational alignment influence such initiation. Another significant finding from my research is that systems designed to connect players such as matchmaking and notifications primarily focus on efficiency and engagement, but not the relational complexity of co-play. For example, MOBA and FPS games provide robust automated tools which algorithmically generate using scale such as matchmaking, rating, but social deduction, narrative and co-op games genres lack comparable support. Kay and Bryce's work on group cohesion show that successful play depends heavily on shared goals and complementary participation. Yet existing systems don't always actively foster these dynamics. It appears that we need models capturing how motivation is co-constructed, shifting dynamically across players, relationships, and even context. So we can see that there's some gaps, and there's a general motivation. Most research treats multiplayer initiation as individual, as I've said, but I'm starting to see a negotiated social process. And as I said, I'd like to move the discussion on from just looking at them as static personal traits, which I think still has value. My research is to be complementary, not combative. But there are factors which I think affect a negotiation of play, which is I've listed there: logistical, affective, circumstantial, and interpersonal. So the study addresses two gaps, and I can see that I've got my notes in the wrong order, so we'll have to manage that. My study addresses, firstly, that most research treats initiation as individual, as I've said, rather than a negotiated social process. And to start a session, it depends on relational readiness, timing, and contextual alignment. And secondly, the current motivational frameworks assume static personal traits, so rather than dynamic moment-to-moment adjustments. My study introduces the concept of negotiation of play, the interplay of logistic, affective, and interpersonal factors shaping whether play even begins at all. By framing relatedness as a precondition rather than just an outcome, I'm hopeful that this study positions multiplayer gaming as a socially embedded practice, requiring a really nuanced theoretical model. This study used a two-phase exploratory design. As you can see, I recruited 14 gamers, of which 7 completed the study, and the demographics are listed there for you. So let's talk about findings. So I conducted a reflexive thematic analysis and found 4 key themes. The pathway to play, a sequence of preferences, timing and negotiation needed before play actually begins. The right game, finding experiences that suit everyone's needs and preferences, not only on an individual level, but collectively as well. And even if that's an abstract notion of the right game, that notion is still there and was present in the data. There's a theme of fresh and unpredictable, the importance of novelty and dynamism in sustaining engagement. And, finally, I think an equally important theme is there's a familiarity role and about establishing an emotional connection which influences inclination and disposition towards co-play. Okay. Here's a few quotes. I wanted to give you some data. I'm not going to read through all of it, but the first quote shows how participants often described how certain features of games, such as genre, mechanics, or aesthetic, shape their initial preferences. The circumstances were rarely rigid. Instead, they reflected quite a fluid responsiveness to the broad and nebulous nature of games. Even if other factors, such as the game played, stayed the same. The second quote shows how games offered asynchronous but harmonic agency between players. However, positive dispositions alone did not guarantee that there's going to be enjoyable play. Some participants recounted instances where familiar or favoured games nevertheless led to frustration or dissatisfaction. And this tension between expectation and experience highlights that such engagement is fragile, even when you're playing with much beloved games, and they can lose their appeal if they're repetitive or they start to stagnate. And finally, participants emphasise the importance of timing, opportunity and invitation in initiating play. Play often depended not only on individual motivation, but on the momentary alignments of circumstance, who was available, who extended an invitation, whether the situation felt right. So negotiations over game choice, group size and means of invitation are integral, or were integral in the data I found, to sustaining a collective willingness to play, revealing a really subtle choreography between seemingly spontaneous social gaming sessions. Choosing the right game is central to successful co-play. It involves balancing personal enjoyment with collective satisfaction. The participants spoke about moments where play generated a sense of effortless connection with others. Such alignment of game choice not only enhanced their immediate experience of play, but also deepened the quality of relationships, even if those interactions were transient and somewhat ephemeral. Beyond in-game synergy, participants reflected on how successful co-play reinforced feelings of social closeness. So play was not just about recreation, it was also a medium through which relational needs such as belonging, affirmation, camaraderie were met. When play styles and preferences aligned, participants often felt that their relationships outside the game were strengthened. Ideal play in this sense, I think, was not only a byproduct of skill or game design, although that is present and important, but also of interpersonal alignment and joint commitment to play. Participants, as you can see from some of the quotes there, finally, they highlighted emotional and even therapeutic impact of playing with others. People describe feeling noticeably better, lighter, more connected, more energised, and I think this underscores the potential for play in restorative self-care, and that the benefits of play can extend beyond the immediate moment. The third theme, fresh and unpredictable, shows that participants described how games offered freshness and unpredictability, and that acted as a magnet for engagement. Novelty appeared to invigorate players' curiosity and motivation, offering discovery and refreshing even familiar play experiences. What I took from this is suggest that perhaps maintaining player engagement isn't just about choosing the right game, but also offering variety and unpredictability on a collective level as well as an individual level. Finally, I just want to share a few words on trust and rapport. For me, it revealed how co-play fosters and depends on deeper social connections. And I think, hopefully relating to some of my peers' comments, social connections are, deeply embedded and important within play. Repeated co-play enables gradual building of trust, understanding, camaraderie, further embedding play within the participants' broader social worlds. I've got a few more slides to show, and I'm not going to show you as many wordy slides. I'll try not to, at least. What can we find from all of this evidence? I think it highlights that trust isn't just an outcome of play, it's often a prerequisite for initiating play in the first place. It reveals that starting multiplayer gaming sessions involves negotiation rather than just pure automation. Players manage competing needs, that may be personal preference, availability, mood, social alignment, and decisions are shaped by subtle social cues, humour, indirect suggestions, shared histories rather than an explicit agreement. Existing motivational theories like SDT often treat relatedness as an outcome of play. So if I was to highlight a contribution here, it also functions as a precondition of play, meaning that play seems to engage dependent on relational readiness before the session even begins. And motivation and decision making in play are fluid and context dependent, shared by internal values, social interaction, and collective readiness. Okay, right, I can see I'm coming up to time, so I've only got a couple more slides to share with you, and let me show you this. So, let me talk about, start to conclude this. In summary, multiplayer initiation is actively co-constructed, not necessarily it's encountered passively. So it depends on micro-alignments of timing, trust, emotional readiness, and of course group preferences. I think this has important implications for designers. Platforms should focus on supporting group decision-making as well as matching individuals. Adaptive systems could integrate contextual cues, which I've mentioned, such as availability, emotional state, social history. And I think there's a gap there for some longitudinal study to explore how groups evolve over sessions, so that we can see how communities of play not only begin, but how they grow, how they may decline, how they may regenerate, and ultimately sometimes end. So, hopefully by understanding these dynamics, we can design more socially grounded multiplayer systems. I just briefly want to talk about platforms and AI, and we'll wrap this up. So here's a few suggestions for ways that we can integrate technology into more socially grounded situations. I'm not going to go through all of them because I'm coming up on time now, but the key one I want to highlight is towards the end. It could provoke the conception of new games, new types of games, by offering publishers and designers new ways that we can socially ground cooperative and collective play. I think that's where we're pretty much at, yes. I'll happily take any questions. Thank you for listening.